Welcome to the Building a Safer Evansville LGBTQ Learning Series, Session 4 of 6 on YRBS Stats and Building Support for LGBTQ Youth. Some ground rules. This is an open and safe space. Questions are welcomed, and we will do our best to answer any concerns that you might have. There will be an email at the end of the presentation that you can send any questions, comments, or concerns to, as well as use the comments section below the video to ask anything that you'd like to see made into the next video or concerns that you might have with what we've presented here today. Content warnings will be issued when dealing with sensitive topics or terminology. Today's content warnings include substance and alcohol abuse, as well as poor mental health and discrimination. Today's takeaways: can I confidently cite LGBTQ+ data to show support for LGBTQ+? And can I recognize specific things that BASE is doing to support LGBTQ+ youth here in Evansville? Our activity today will be discussing how can your organization contribute to understanding LGBTQ+ youth in Evansville. To start, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is a survey that is done every other year to monitor health-related behaviors in youth. This is where we'll be pulling all of our data for today from. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey is administered at a local level, and it helps you track health concerns such as tobacco and alcohol use, risky sexual behaviors, mental health, and more. There are some concerns on lack of data in regards to LGBTQ+. It's just the way the questions are phrased. They tend to group things into LGB. They use heterosexual when they might be referring to non-transgender. It's just based on how the questions are asked. The data itself, we feel very confident in how representative it is as best as possible. But when it's being presented, if there are any concerns that you might have about the data in the next couple of slides, please recognize that it's just the way that the data was presented to us and the way that we were able to gather it. When referencing some data today, we will be talking about two different sources, one from Evansville High School and one from Rural Rock County. Evansville High School obviously is representative of Evansville, and Rural Rock County is the Rural Rock County Community School Districts. So that means all of the schools that are not Janesville and Beloit and any of the metropolitan areas, such as Edgerton, Union, Evansville, any of the smaller local communities. So some data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. In Evansville, 21% of Evansville middle and high school population identify as LGBTQ+, with 25% are unsure of how they would identify. This comes from the 2018 Evansville Middle and High School YRBS. Compared to a national rate of 8%, or 1.3 million high school students in America reporting being lesbian, gay, or bisexual. So our youth population here for LGBTQ+ is significantly higher than what we deal with nationally. That's pretty concerning when it comes to some of the consistent health issues that LGBTQ+ youth face, because we're facing it on a different level than the rest of the country. So LGBTQ+ substance use in Evansville is significantly higher than their non-LGBTQ+ peers. As you can see here, alcohol, binge drinking, marijuana, cigarettes, and vaping, those stats are significantly higher, with the lighter shade of purple representing LGBTQ+. So after you visualized it for a second, here's the actual data showing that alcohol has just about 1% difference, so not terribly higher. Binge drinking is almost 7% higher, marijuana is 15% higher, cigarettes 20% higher, and vaping is 13% higher than you would see for LGBTQ+ versus their non-LGBTQ+ peers. So going back to that previous slide, those numbers kind of show off. I mean, you can see significantly much higher rates than their non-LGBTQ+ peers. And transgender breakdown, transgender youth face significantly higher rates than their non-transgender peers. Similarly, vaping is 24 to 29, cigarettes 5 to 39, chewing tobacco 1.72% to 13.64%. So combined with the previous two slides, you see LGBTQ+ substance use is a lot higher, LGBT substance use is a lot higher, transgender substance use is a lot higher, and this is because of discrimination that they face. This is because we live in a significantly more stressful world for LGBTQ+. They face a lot of higher, as we've discussed in previous videos, they face higher rates of discrimination and verbal and physical abuse. So it's not shocking when we see that these substance rates are a lot higher. For the transgender breakdown, that comes from Rural Rock County High Schools, 2018 YRBS, because again, the reason we don't have that for specific Evansville data is because of the way that the YRBS is broken down. The number of transgender youth in our schools just in Evansville is a lot lower, so it's easier to pull that data, and the schools and the state are afraid that we would use that to target out specific transgender youth in our communities. So we have to look at a much broader pool, but it's consistently across the board showing that transgender face those much higher rates. Tobacco use is like that. Poor mental health, kind of across the board again as well. LGB face much higher rates of poor mental health than non-LGB, and the same with transgender. So the factors that we're looking at are poor mental health days in the last 30 days. Have you self-harmed in the last 12 months? Have you considered suicide in the last 12 months? And have you attempted suicide in the last 12 months? And it's pretty, I mean, the data is there again from Rural Rock County High Schools. We weren't able to pull this stuff from specifically Evansville because the data response was so small. But if you look at the actual numbers themselves, poor mental health days, 67.67% in non-LGB to 93.08% for LGB. So almost 94% of the students, the LGB students in Rural Rock County Community High Schools face those rates of poor mental health days. Self-harm, 13.41 compared to well over half with 53. Considered suicide in the last 12 months, 14.22% to 53.91%, well over half. And attempted suicide was before 6.54 for non-LGB, and for LGB is close to 30 with 29.88%. Similarly, for transgender youth, poor mental health days, 70.38 for non-transgender as opposed to 87.5 for transgender. Self-harm, 16.83% to 68.18%. Considered suicide, 17.31% compared to 58.33%, almost 40% difference. And attempted suicide, 7.96% to 40.91%. The data kind of speaks for itself. I'll let this stay up on the screen for just a little bit longer so you can take some notes or examine what the data itself has to say. Go back to the previous slide. Again, those differences are pretty shocking. Here are some myths on LGBTQ+. There are several ideas that are floating around for people who are anti-LGBTQ+, don't believe that the equality needs to be there, and don't believe that we need to really focus on LGBTQ+. These are the myths that they kind of use, that most LGBTQ+ come from a broken home. There is no proof, nothing to really back that up. The concerning data about broken homes with LGBTQ+ is that 40% of homeless individuals identify as LGBTQ+. This goes back to the discrimination. This goes back to the substance use, mental health. These issues are not because somebody is LGBTQ+. They face these issues because of the way that other people treat them. So most LGBTQ+ don't come from a broken home. It's quite the opposite. There's nothing to really back that up. This is a completely false myth. Sexual orientation and gender identity can be changed at any time. Well, that's also, again, not true. There are studies that have shown that it is both inherent in your DNA and your epigenetics, or basically, easier way to understand it, nature versus nurture. UCLA researchers did a really wide study that basically showed that there are specific genetic markers that show between twins, that there are ways that your DNA is predisposed to it, and the environment that you were raised in can change those factors as well. So you can't just suddenly switch to being bisexual. You can't just suddenly say, I'm going to change my gender identity. These are things that are inherent, and to repress those means that you're going against what your natural feeling is. Plus the fact that there are over 500 different species in nature that express signs of different sexual orientation than just heterosexuality is kind of telling that it's definitely a natural occurring thing. So again, sexual orientation and gender identity can be changed at any time. False, no proof. Another one, LGBTQ+ have shorter lifespans than their non-LGBTQ+ peers. This was based off of a faulty 1994 study that collected data from LGBTQ+ specific obituaries that didn't accurately represent the broader, greater LGBTQ+ population in America. Again, this was kind of at the height of the AIDS epidemic. This is when you saw far more people contracting it. They were at the end of their lifespan because of the health troubles that they were facing and the fact that they weren't getting the help that they needed from healthcare. So to say that LGBTQ plus have shorter lifespans than their non-LGBTQ plus peers is going off of faulty data that was collected in an errant manner. So there's no proof, again, that LGBTQ plus have shorter lifespans than their non-LGBTQ plus peers. Finally, same-sex parents are worse than heterosexual parents. That, again, is not true. Study after study after study has shown that there is no proof about this whatsoever. The American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry released a study in 2013 that children have the same exact quality of upbringing. The American Academy of Psychiatrics released a study in 2002 and 2009, and again in 2013, saying that there is no proof that there is any difference of emotional, physical well-being for youth who are raised by same-sex parents as heterosexual counterparts. So there's really, there's a lot of myths that exist out there. Whether or not the data exists to back them up, that's kind of point blank, there's nothing. These 4 myths are commonly used as reasons why we shouldn't partake in supporting LGBTQ+. And there you go. You've got some facts and ideas that if somebody brings this up, you can go ahead and shoot it down and say, no, that's not true. So building support for LGBTQ+ youth. Evansville students, again, identify as LGBTQ+ at higher rates than the national average. Substance use in LGBTQ+ populations is concerning both nationally and here specifically in Evansville. Historically, we need to recognize that safe spaces for LGBTQ+ often revolved around alcohol or substance abuse, such as bars, nightclubs, social gatherings, etc., like that. We talked about that a little bit in the history and importance of Pride, where we talked about the modern LGBTQ+ movement kind of having its traces go back to bars in the 1960s, lesbian and gay circles. We talked about it in our safe spaces. And so when you see that alcohol and substance abuse is tied very tight and intertwined with LGBTQ+, it's not surprising that you see that substance use. And because of that social stigma that still exists around LGBTQ+ and that rejection breeding pain, LGBTQ+ individuals are driven to those safe spaces because they can express themselves in a way that they don't have to feel repressed or dangerous about. So building that support is essential because it means that you're not just having a safe space being a bar or a nightclub. It can also be a school. It can be a restaurant. It can be a place that community members just all around can engage in. And that's why it's important to build those safe spaces because there's, again, still so much more that needs to be done for LGBTQ+. And my last bullet point is that there's more research to be done to support LGBTQ+. As we showed in the YRBS statistics, the breakdowns treating LGBTQ+ as a monolith means that the research we do going forward needs to be gathered in a way that we don't just kind of lump them all together and can break it out and figure out exactly what needs to be done for LGBTQ+ in our schools, in our town, in our community as a whole. So what does this mean for our coalition? Well, BASE has begun doing work for the STOP Act grant, the Sober Truth on Preventing Underage Drinking Act grant, which focuses on LGBTQ+ youth alcohol use. So building up resources for that, engaging with that, being able to support the events that we put on, such as a June Pride Month or our I Am Jazz reading, all focuses on the STOP Act grant. Supporting Pride in June. Pride is a very important part of LGBTQ+ culture. It is a month-long celebration. It happens every year, but with the increased visibility of Pride also means more alcohol. It means substance use. It means that there are a community that has been so inherently tied to substance and alcohol abuse with the nightclubs and existing safe spaces. We need to build up those safe spaces so that way Pride in June isn't just about stuff that it has always been about. We need to make it about the community, showing support for the community, providing alternative activities. So Pride in June is an incredibly important part for what our coalition does. Education, again, providing resources and learning more about LGBTQ+. You're here watching this video right now, which is a really important part of that, but we still need to do more for our healthcare, our schools, our law enforcement. Making that education and providing those resources for all parts of our community helps provide those safe spaces to make it so that way we don't have to think about or deal with over 40% of transgender youth at our schools having attempted suicide in the last year. Again, going back through building and supporting safe spaces, focusing on underage drinking right now. That is our biggest concern with the Stop Act grant. Focusing on underage drinking, if we can deal with that problem and work on that, we can also begin focusing on substance abuse, mental health, and whatever else the LGBTQ+ youth in our communities need. But most importantly of all, and I said this in every single presentation I've done so far, is we need to listen. We need to support, we need to find a reason to work for LGBTQ+ populations in our community. If they come to us and say, these are the things, these are the concerns, these are the problems that we're having, we need to engage with them, we need to accept it, and we need to work on those things. Similarly, if LGBTQ+ individuals or organizations come and say, here are the problems that we had with this video, here are the problems that we had with the activities that are going on, you need to engage with them. You need to be better, and you need to provide what the populations need, not what you think they would want. So again, listening goes back to being probably the most important thing to do for all of this. Today's activity: contribute to understanding LGBTQ+ youth in Evansville. So the two big questions that we have for you are, what data can your organization gather and use in regards to LGBTQ+ youth in Evansville? And what is the best format for your organization to share this information? So how can you participate to understanding LGBTQ+ youth in Evansville? What data can be gathered? What can you use? What do you need? And how can you share this information in a way that benefits the community and LGBTQ+ youth? Those are the questions that we have. I'll go ahead and leave this slide up. You can pause the video, discuss with your organization, think on it. If you have any questions or concerns, please go ahead and email them to us. But really, this activity is designed to get you thinking about how can you engage with this before it becomes a bigger problem, and what are ways that you can help us combat these issues here in our community.
If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email us at baseevansville@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If there's something that you weren't super sure on in today's presentation, you just wanted to say thank you for putting this on, or if you feel like there's something that's missing from this presentation, please, please, please email us. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your time today. It's been really wonderful. We hope that this becomes something that you can find useful for your organization, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye.